is Lavern with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today I'm going to take a look at Storytell.ai, which is essentially a world building collaboration tool that you can use for yourself or amongst a team. It draws upon a lot of different AI applications, so it's not really just one. It's basically several different types of AI tools all in one. And what it allows you to do is create projects, and within those projects, you're able to add content. So I'm a collaborator on this project, and if you guys don't know about it yet, this is Panovo. This is in a fantasy world for a 5e rule set. It's myself and a few other community members that are a part of this group. We're currently working on some content for the future. I'm not going to elaborate too much on them because I don't know when exactly they're going to be done or what the actual end result will be. But this really helps you gather your thoughts. And if you're thinking about like your homebrew world and you want to finalize it or get it to a point where you can work with it, I think using this type of tool, especially something like Storytell AI, is going to help dungeon masters, world builders, game designers, that sort of thing in the future. So let's take a look. So over here on the left, I have my own conversations that I've created. So I'm going to get my pointer out here so you can see where I'm pointing. But basically over here on the left, you have assets, and these are essentially uploaded files or items that were generated within the Storytell AI, and you can also import other things. And what you can do is you can query your existing content. So there's different templates and different materials that are used to build the world data, and then you can apply tags to them. So when you're searching, you can filter out what types of materials you want to query. So it's basically like a database where you can upload PDFs or documents or even lists of URLs, whatever you need to basically go in and try to organize your information and have that stuff at your fingertips. So when you're building your world, it just kind of starts basically incorporating itself into your world building. So as you add to it, it gets more and more useful, and you have more and more ways that you can create content and kind of stay within canon, or at least have the official content, so that if you're working within that world or within that specific module or whatever you're working on, it'll help narrow it down, or it will give you the broad view, the overview of what content you want. So I'm going to take a look at one of the projects that I'm working on. I haven't gotten this approved yet, or I haven't ran this by the team, but essentially what we're going to do is start designing some different things for the game. And in this case, this was some kind of creature that somebody was working on. I don't remember if this was me or someone else, but it has something to do with the monster manual that we're working on. So that's not a secret. But basically, these were things on, converting and using Storytell AI to basically to add to the existing world and the existing lore, and also ideas and brainstorming and creating images and all kinds of things. So I'm going to go to one of the things I was working on for Panovo, and I want him to create a series of kind of like lower level adventures that are shorter. Maybe they might be a 1-shot or a 3-shot where it takes three sessions to complete. So I asked it what opportunities in Kizdir, and Kizdir is one of the nations or one of the areas in Panovo. I said, what opportunities in Kizdir for short adventures do we have? So it spit out some content based off of the materials that are the chat sources that are uploaded, which is the player's guide, some of the lore, things from the player's primer, those sort of things, so that we have a foundation to build upon. And it kind of gave me 3 kind of generic ones, but they are based off of what's already established. So that's nice. You don't have to go back through different PDFs and research those. I mean, although that is good for memory and for getting more familiar, but if you don't want to spend hours upon hours pouring through PDFs or hardback books, you can use this to kind of help you. And if you do have hard materials that are not digitized yet, so essentially like a hardback book, or perhaps you have like something that you've written, you've gotten a binder or notebook, you can feed that, you can digitize those by scanning them or taking a photo of them and uploading them into an AI tool. And the OCR trace capability and the character recognition in AI tools these days is phenomenal. It basically, it can read text, even if it's in different languages, as long as it's legible and it's somewhat readable. Because I know there's some PDFs out there that were created early on that are good work, but people use photos instead of actual text. So if you can feed those pages into an AI tool, it'll transcribe it for you. So essentially, it'll scan it for you. And if you have like a large book, you can, you could take photos of different pages that you want material from. It would be a little bit of work, but it sure would beat hand typing everything out. Let's put it that way. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do an entire hardback book, but if you have a section you want to do, like maybe just do chapter 1 and then maybe do it in pieces, that might be doable. So it basically, the answer it got for the opportunities for short adventures, there's some Wild Realm expeditions. So Wild Realms exist in Panovo. There's 3 main ones. There's some dangerous wild realms that offer lucrative and perilous adventures. There's the bitter coldwood, basically like a northern, cold areas. You have the high frost north. It's like a big glacial, mountainous, Arctic expanse. And then you have a oozing grove. It's not fully developed yet, but it's basically another third dangerous area to explore. So it's just nice knowing that this oozing grove is still open to interpretation. So if someone wanted to develop this in our team, we can just run it by and say, hey, I want to develop some lore and some ideas for the oozing grove, and you could start generating content for it. So if you were new to this world and you wanted a world build off of it, it would still be open at this point. Or if you were a member of this team and you wanted to develop it some more, at least give it like its own little handbook or something like that. You can run it by the team and then decide if you want to do a handbook for the rest of them. So it'd be kind of like a gazetteer for each one of these wild realms. So maybe have some NPCs, a couple new spells, maybe a player option, perhaps some details for locations, maybe a few new items that are unique to the region. And then, of course, some maybe 3 different adventure seeds for short, low level, or starting adventures for each one of those regions. So then it gets into these clan-based ones, which is in Kisdir, they have a lot, like a large dwarven presence. So they have different factions, like political intrigue and quests that are based off the 7 dwarven clans. Then you have organizational quests like the Bravehammer Adventurers Guild, the Order of the Stone Sentinels, the Eternal Forgers, and then there's other things for like crafting and trade opportunities. And then, of course, underground exploration. We all like dungeon crawls, so that's another thing. And then, of course, there's some minor one here with some religious pilgrimages and things like that. So those are pretty neat, solid ideas. So then I asked it to kind of bake in some short adventure outlines. So it took some adventure hooks for Frostroot Harvest in the Bitter Coldwood. So this is one of the wild realms. And essentially it made adventure hook for it, some details about the contract, some wild realm challenges for the environment and such, and then some key encounters, some complications, and rewards. So this would give you an outline to develop your own little like adventure if you wanted to. So you could actually publish something like this, maybe with a little bit more information, a little bit more polished, but this would be a good start for GMs who like to homebrew or that don't want to be railroaded too much. Or one of our team members can take this information and totally create a whole adventure off of it and fill in the blanks and make all the assets and the artwork and the images and maps and everything else. And then you can build it in whatever virtual tabletop that you use. In my case, I use Fantasy Grounds, so I'd be using this. And essentially, I'm going to create a Panovo Guilds handbook because I think that's an important aspect of adventure. And I also think it's important for world building. So I might start with something like that to kind of fill in the blanks in between the different realms, so that when you are going to adventure in Panovo, you have a starting point. And I believe that aside from towns and cities and such, and ruins and those sort of things, I think it's important to have a foundation for players. So I'm going to run this by the team and see if they like this idea. But basically develop like a guild's handbook, which will feature, in this case, probably just the Kizdir guild. Maybe I'll just make one for that guild in particular, but I kind of wanted it more of an overall content book. And then that would give lots of different things to the game masters and to world builders and homebrew. So that way you have a starting point and then you just kind of build from there. So I'm thinking about making something like that and then using Kizdir as a full example, and then leaving the other ones up to the others, or for world builders, or for possible future content. So if someone in our team wanted to build another handbook for another guild, they could do that. So this would be like a framework slash gazetteer, or like in an adventure, kind of all in one, like an accessory for guilds. And then in Fantasy Grounds, I could use this as a place to enter some of the data and create a module or adventure for it. But Storytell.ai doesn't directly integrate with Fantasy Grounds, but it does give you the text, the context, the ideas, and some of the tools that you would need to fill in the blanks in Fantasy Grounds too, or whatever virtual tabletop you're using. So Fantasy Grounds is what I'm most familiar with. So you have these different challenges and different outlines for the different wild realms. So here's Rescue in the Oozing Grove. So this one, I'd probably leave it kind of open-ended, maybe just leave the outline and then wait for a book to be adapted for the Ooze Grove. Then there's also the Frozen Expedition. And what's kind of nice is these scaled up differently. So you have different levels available here. So one of them is 3 to 5. They're kind of lower, middle tier, upper, lower tier kind of adventures. So between levels 4 through 6, or somewhere in there, like 3 through 5. Here's one for 5 through 7. And then you would have guild operations and context. So the Bravehammer Adventurers Guild operates from a grand hall in Kizdalor, which is the capital of Kizdir. The guild serves as a central hub where adventurers can find contacts, access training facilities, utilize the guild library with maps and ancient text, and receive support services, including healing magic and equipment procurement. So this also kind of opens up for organized play outside of the game world, where you have dungeon masters, players, and such or game masters who might be inclined to use this as a starting point for their campaign. And also in real life, maybe there's some incentives or some kickbacks or something. Maybe they got a free adventure or something like that. So sort of incentivizes the community to use your content in a way, depending on how you structure it and such. But that's kind of more of a long-term thing. So basically I thought, okay, it'd be nice to have a Bravehammer Adventurers Guild handbook so that you could create content based off of it. Essentially, you get recruited to the Bravehammers Adventurers Guild, and then from there, use that as your springboard for adventuring. And what's kind of nice about guilds is they don't always have to be stuck in one location. They can have chapters in other regions. So it's kind of why I like guilds and clan type stuff, because even though Kizdir is the main headquarters, you can have branches in other nearby provinces and areas. So that way you're not stuck in one region. You're not kind of painted into a corner, essentially. So it operates from the Grand Hall in the Dwarven Kingdom of Kizdir, and it's not just dwarves, but that's the main focus and population of the area. But guild members can get access to guild-sponsored expeditions. You have camaraderie with like social gatherings and mentoring programs, and then the guild can maintain somewhat of a neutrality in clan politics, though individual guild members might have clan allegiances. So that could be some extra world building. Hey, cool. Hey, what's up? Algorithm took me here taking notes. That's cool, man. Welcome. So add-in ALW. So I'm using this for Fantasy Grounds, but you could use this for anything. And this is Storytell.ai, which is a paid program. I actually have this donated to me by my team that are working on the world of Panovo, but it has a lot of built-in tools. It has a Chrome extension. There are in-app notes and in-app tutorials, so you can kind of get an idea of how to use the application. And if you're kind of new to AI tools or prompting and such, it has built-in help for that. So that's one of the strengths of using Storytell AI as your world building tools, because it has all this inline tools that help you kind of get used to it. And it even gives you suggestions on how to save on credits, because it goes on a credit system that you pay for. But I'm lucky and fortunate that someone's paying for this for me. But I noticed that when I started using the AI tool, and if you keep iterating conversations, it'll keep taking all that information and pulling it down, and that uses a lot more of your credit. So what it suggested to me is that I start a new project if I don't want to gobble up all my credits at once. So if you're not used to doing AI, what happens is this particular tool keeps the context better because it's got like several AI tools across the board at once. But if you were to use something like the free Google Gemini or something like that, you can kind of do something similar, but you would have to copy and paste that information and put it into your project file, or you could just strictly stay with that and use it and not worry about credits. But I think I'm going to be using this more and more as I get used to it, and I'll find a way in my workflow to just utilize it for the important stuff, meaning when I have the story and the ideas together, then I'll use it and prompt and query different products that I have in here. But essentially, all these PDFs were uploaded by our team. For instance, there's a PDF called Dragons in Panovo. I can actually access that asset and download it as a PDF. So if I wanted information and I needed to use it outside of Storytell, I could do that. So once you create something and you're done, you can compile it and ask that it creates an overview and a larger organized information into this PDF, which can be added to the campaign knowledge, which would be an official source essentially. So you have all these conversations, and then you can compile the information and organize it and format it and such, and then have it. It'll put it in the story archives as a almost a complete product. I wouldn't say complete, but essentially that's something that you would want it when you start getting closer to tidying up your campaign records. And what's kind of nice, I don't know what the upload limitation is, but if you had like Paizo like products, if you like Pathfinder, you can upload all your PDFs in there and then create your own homebrew based off the canon stuff, so that it has some continuity with the world you're working in, that sort of thing. So Brave Hammer Adventures Guild. So this is an overview of the guild. So what I had asked it, one of my queries here, was after I got all this information above here that I spoke about earlier about guilds and short adventures and that sort of thing. What I asked for is help solidify the guild and potential starting hooks to join the guild, and also feature the guild's resources, leaders, allies, and enemies for slight world. I didn't want to get too deep in the world building, but I want to include some of that and also some of the politics of the kingdom, and to help round out the guild's existence within the canon and the setting of Panovo. So that way it kind of stays true to the content, and you're not getting as many conflicts of interest when you have several books and you want to connect them together. So that's something that might be important to some people. Some people, they don't care about that, but if you want consistency in your project, in your world, this would be helpful for that. So it's taking all these previous conversations and answering this query here. So now it's built this overview for the Brave Hammer Adventurers Guild, which I'm going to use as a model guild for the guilds. And if I have this approved by the team, or they like the idea, I'll develop it more and I'll get more images created, and I'll start thinking about how I want to format it and how I want it to be presented as a supplement. So maybe like a gazetteer or like a supplement for the Panovo world, which would go over the guilds, and then use one of the guilds as your starting point or as a template or example. So you have some starting hooks when you join the guild. So twice or annually, spring and autumn, the Brave Hammer Guild opens and hosts recruitment for new members. Basically, there's trials, and they hold it at the main hall in Kisdalor, which is the main capital. Aspiring adventurers undergo a 3-day evaluation testing combat skills, survival knowledge, problem solving, and teamwork. So and what it does is it goes to it reference the Panovo's player's guide. It gives me the citation of where it pulled that from, and that helps shape the content that I'm building, and it helps build it towards the canon that's already established. So anything that already exists is going to be pulled into this, or at least considered when it's making new content. So for starting hooks, you have is proving trial for open recruitment. For day one, you might do a sparring match, which would be a combat assessment. A survival challenge would be to navigate a controlled section of a taiga forest, identifying dangers and harvesting resources, that sort of thing. And then day 3 would be a mock contract, which you would work in teams to complete a simulated guild contract, which would involve puzzle solving, negotiations, and a mock combat. I think that alone would be a great onboarding tool, not only for the Panovo world, but also for gaming, tabletop RPGs, and learning how to play a role-playing game as a team. So that alone, this starting hook, I think I'm going to make this as my adventure. Even though it's not the most interesting and fun, it can be depending on how you write it. And I think this is a good way to segue into using the supplement and to getting familiar with Panovo and its world, its denizens, and also in real life, learning how to work as a team and kind of get used to playing. And then also you could show people how to use the whatever platform you're using for the game. If you're using Foundry or Fantasy Grounds or Roll20 or whatever you're going to use. So I think Storytell.ai is a good tool to help you build content for at least when you're getting started, or if you already have a bunch of content. So here in the clan sponsorship, you have to be a clan member in good standing. I think that would basically mean that you have to be, on the up and up. You can't be a total douche or a criminal, at least not openly. You complete a clan assigned test quest, usually involving clan interests. Attend a formal induction ceremony before the sponsoring Thane. The benefits are you start a bronze rank with priority consideration for contracts related to the sponsoring of clans' interests, that sort of thing. However, guild neutrality means that members cannot refuse contracts solely based on clan rivalries. So that might be a challenge. And I think that makes good friction and gameplay and immersion, because not everyone likes a unionized they don't necessarily want to unionize guild hall, right? Some people want to operate by themselves. Sometimes their ideals clash. I think that makes for more interesting and not such a kind of a pushover kind of, sheep of the herd type thing mentality. Emergency conscription. So there's another idea here where during time of crisis, such as the Wild Realms expanding, external threats, or major expeditions, the guild may issue emergency conscription notices to capable individuals that are already in Kisdalor. Characters with relevant skills receive urgent summons to the guild hall. So that would be another cool way for like intermediate players to get them to participate in the guild a little bit more. So not everyone wants to do guild work necessarily. Let's see. So that's if you have an emergency. Transferring from another guild hall. So adventurers who are members of other adventure guilds across Panovo can transfer to the Bravehammer through reciprocal agreements. Perhaps there's some sort of referral sent. But this is especially common with guilds from Last Vault, Hundaland, and Bjornheim. So there's some quotes here as to how these organizations communicate and how they recruit and such from the other content. So they included that in there, which I think is cool. You get a letter of good standing from a previous guild. You have a minimum of a bronze rank, and you've completed at least one probationary contract to demonstrate your understanding of the wild realms and dangers specific to Kisdir or whatever region you're in. There's rescue or outstanding service. So individuals who save guild members, complete extraordinary feats in the wild realms, or provide exceptional service to Kisdir Kingdom, they may be offered immediate membership by the guild leadership. So it depends on the situation, and that gives the GM flexibility if they even want to use the guilds or if how they want to incorporate it into their game. So you have like an apprentice path. Then you get into the guild structure and hierarchy, like how the rankings work. And then you get into some politics. And even it mentions some guild members that would be crucial for world building and for a starting point and for people to look up to and, you know, that sort of thing. And what's kind of neat is if you play long enough, some of your players might become mentors as they get to higher level play. Because I imagine the lower tiers, this would be very useful. For the middle tier, I think this would be great occasionally and to have a place to go, like when you need to rest or if you've got wounded or if you got treasure to offload. So kind of like the Bastion system. And then the guild masters might request or suggest that you become like I guess you're off duty kind of things, or when you're not adventuring or when you're basically ready to retire, essentially you kind of become a part of that guild and you don't necessarily completely 100% write your character out of adventuring. You occasionally go on a high level adventure and potentially contribute to the guild itself. So there's some really cool opportunities for world building, but then you also have other opportunities and things to consider. So when I was going through this, I started thinking, not everyone likes organized play. They don't necessarily like unionized, type of things. So it really depends. So I put I asked this once I got all this stuff done. I asked, my prompt was, in Kisdir proper and Panovo as a whole, is there guild recognition and rivalry throughout Panovo? Can we define the benefits and risks of memberships more? So it kind of went into these principles like mutual recognition, professional standards, information sharing, dispute resolution, independence, that sort of thing. And then it kind of gets into the signatories, the non-signatories, major guild halls and their relationships with Bravehammer. And then it kind of gets into, this is more specific to Kisdir and that realm and that specific guild hall, but you can do this same kind of treatment with any of the guilds, depending on how you want to build your world. And kind of use Panovo as kind of like a starting point, I guess. So you just kind of have like different factions here and how they fit in and how they relate, sort of, and if they're rivals and that sort of thing. So I thought that would be interesting because you might have sabotage, or you might have a situation where the guild is corrupted by a bad member, like somebody in leadership that's just a really not good for the guild. So I think those are fun for like mid-level to higher level adventures. Start getting to politics and that sort of thing. And then I wrote, after it gave me all that stuff, I said, I like the direction. I said, how much of these guilds, locations, and foundational lore is canon to Panovo? Because at this point, I wasn't sure how much the tool or the AI really drew upon the different sources that we've already uploaded. So I said, does the guild reflect the themes and the style of previous conversations and content? Check the meta for other works and sources. So I wanted to make sure and verify that the stuff I'm making up with the tool is going to kind of fit in with all the others. So I like the freedom of designing and world building, but at the same time, I want it to align with what's already established. That way, we're not going in 5 directions. So the canon verification and tone assessment. So it gives me the sources of where it got all this information and what was invented that was not canon. So it says every single NPC name and personality were made up at this point. The guild founding date was kind of made up. Adventures Guild compact and its provisions, the ranking systems, the starting hooks, the specific facilities, memorial wall, and that sort of things. But the things it did pull upon was like the Adventuring Guild exists in Kisdir. There's 7 clans, the Order of the Stone Sentinels, and the major organizations. Other Adventurers Guild across Panovo, so that was important. General guild structure, the Wild Realms, which is where a lot of the adventures end up. Dwarven culture within Panovo, and the Adventurers Guild background with guild connections features. So that gave me the starting point here, this quotation of where it was taken from. So all these things here are quotes from where it took the information, which I think is great. And then it said that some of the things that it would fix because it didn't match or align with the kind of like the overall theme of Panovo. So here's what it suggested. So eccentric, strange, and whimsical things. So for example, a wilderness of whimsy and wonder. So it says a kraken that yearns for a robin's melody, giants that turn snow into flowers, pixies creating tree barriers. So those were things that were toned for Panovo. Enchantment, reality entwines with the unknown, concealed adventures await, and adventure forward. So grand quest, untamed wilderness, promises of immeasurable wealth. So it looked at the tone that it was writing in initially, and it said political intrigue, mortality, and grim survival were things that it wrote. So it had a heavy emphasis on death. It had initially had dark political intrigue, hostile intentional international relations, gritty survival mechanics, and lethal environments, and then Game of Thrones style clan politics, power struggles, and then very serious, almost grimdark approach. So instead, it went ahead and went back and analyzed what it did right. It did some consistent world building. It respected the established canon in most regards. It had some comprehensive coverage. It had actionables for DMs, like clear adventure hooks and campaign frameworks, and it was mechanically sound. It works within the D&D 5e system because we actually use the OGL, the 3.5 or whatever the latest and greatest 5.1, whatever that is, SRD. What it did wrong, it was too dark and serious, overemphasized mortality, too much political cynicism, missing the wonder, and overinvented. So it created entire histories and NPCs without canon foundation. So the Panovo feel should be optimistic, whimsical, thriving, epic, and wonder over dread. So there we go. So it's taken the core values of the canon and has pulled that back a little, and it went ahead and recommended how it was going to rewrite it. And I don't mind it having a little fluff like that. I do prefer darkness over light, but that's just me personally. But when it comes to world building and playing with the public and, being basically a supplement for the entire ecosystem of the role-playing game world and the community, I think it's good to stay in line with the the image that you're trying to portray through your product. So if it was up to me, this whole thing would have been completely different. But it's not just me, there's other team members. So I'm trying to be a team player and shift away from survival horror and get more into discovery and fun, and also kind of catering a little bit more for lower to mid-level as opposed to high level play. Because when you're looking from the top down, you sort of look at it as you're almost like this god mode, and you're looking at this whole thing and you just want it to be cool, right? But if you look at it from the bottom up, you're starting off, you've never played role-playing games before, you're uncertain about the jargon and the terminology, and you're not even familiar with the gameplay dynamics or how other people interact with you. So taking out some of that isn't a big deal. I don't think it's going to ruin the feel of it too much. And I do kind of want to make sure I stay within the bounds of the Panovo image, even though I myself like a little darker. So I could incorporate that a little bit. I just don't want to go overboard. And so that's for my own personal authorship, like I don't want to be necessarily railroaded into feeling a certain way or being a certain way, but I think it's important to maintain some kind of consistency throughout the product. So it might be that you have one author or one contributor that has all this really cool dark evil stuff, but that would only appeal to, maybe a quarter of your population. Then you got people who like the more lighthearted, fluffy, kind of humorous stuff, and then you got people that are more into like um, kind of like strategy and realism and wanting that that crunch, right? And then you got the world builders who just want lore and story and that sort of, and have this narrative, so you kind of have to balance those tools. So what I said is, or what I asked is, I would like you to perform option number 1, which was to rewrite with the correct tone, but keeping the structure but adding whimsy and wonder. And so I think that was a good idea at this time. So I said I would like you to perform option number 1 from the previous conversation above. However, reorganize the mess, clean up the data, and purpose for beginners and intermediate player character roles with options to allow higher level players to play along for mentoring, to shape and forge, the direction and of the guild, and for character development, and also for indirect bastion support. So if you're going to use like a home base type thing, to add some of that stuff in there. And then I'd mention the 2024 5e rule set, because that's what we're going to write it for. So basically it gave me this answer where it took and cleaned up all of that information, compiled everything from before into this really nice laid out product here, essentially. And it went and redefined everything, cleaned it up, compared what it was going to do in regards to kind of meshing everything together. And then it defined the guilds and the structure and like a starting point, like a template. It went into the different primary realms that you adventure in. It doesn't mean you can't have a quest within a city or something, but this gives a lot of adventure hooks into the wild realms. And then it kind of gets into all kinds of world building aspects. It's pretty lengthy. I mean, it really went through and took this to the next level. So that's pretty cool. So then I said, for game masters, immersion and success for new players can be a selling point. Pre-made adventures and structures versus homebrew and random adventures. So I want it to be structured in such a way that the content can appeal to different levels of play and different styles. So that's not easy to do, because it expands the size of your supplement, but it also creates more potential for everyone to be kind of confused over the direction of the content. So that's another thing to consider when you're world building is, that balance, and it's not easy. So then I said, let's proceed with including guild considerations like quitting a guild, retirement, severance, Providing a role and a place to return after a big life event. Like, so let's say you get you get injured in an adventure. So instead of writing off that character or giving them a death with no end, this can give you that closure, right? So let's say you had a really cool adventure that you enjoyed playing, but there's such a high level that there's less opportunities for them, or maybe they were crippled or became handicapped, or perhaps they got married and had kids or whatever. So you give them a spot or at least a little paragraph or so of what you can do with those characters. So if they come too old to quest or that sort of thing, that would be a nice consideration to put in the guild. And after all, it is kind of like a union in a sense. So you get these benefits and such even after you've served your time. So it's create 5 golden rules for Panovo guilds. A little bit more obtuse, like not so direct for just that one guild. You would do it for all of the all the Panovo, if possible. And then create 5 golden rules for the guilds. So it'd be more obtuse to settle debts, to identify crimes, negligence, neglect of duty, and then your fees and such, conflicts of interest, guild betrayals, that sort of thing. So I wanted that to be in there because that makes for more adventures and it makes it more interesting and more realistic, because the guilds can't always be the shining pinnacle of perfectness. There's going to be flaws, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be problematic members, you're going to have opportunities to set up political intrigue and inner fighting and rivalries and all kinds of cool stuff. So there's an exit process, there's a final accounting, you have alumni status, lifetime benefits. So depending on what you get, so you get discounts and stuff. So it's almost like being in a real life guild or a real life thing. Kind of think of it like the Elks Lodge, or if you were the Masons, or perhaps you're in a labor union. It kind of reminds me of that. Um, and then you have restrictions. You have a network of alumni type benefits, new career paths for alumni. So craftsmanship, merchants, teachers, guards, or militia, scholars, tavern owners, and guild administration. So those are really cool high level things that you can obtain as your character gets much further into your game or into your game world. So you have involuntary departures, like dismissals for like criminal activity, major contract violations, endangering guild reputation, those sort of things. There's hearings, sentencing, there's blacklisting, redemption paths. I mean, I think all this stuff makes for really good character development and also world building. So it really helps. And you have retirement for honoring veterans. So those have basically long service of 20 plus years. So that sort of thing. So you have healthcare and pension and all kinds of cool stuff if you want to include that, if you want to get that deep. So I think that should be a part of the, if you're going to make like a guild handbook, I think that would be important. And then, so there's that, right? So all this stuff really makes for good adventuring, and it also covers a lot of bases. Like you're not going to cover every single thing. But I think with this conversation, this big long list of things that I've gone through, you could have a pretty well-rounded supplement that is going to handle like 90% of the player and the game master and the world builder's needs. And then from there, you have to leave a little bit of flexibility. Like you can't develop every little single thing either, because then that just where's the room for expansion? Like how are people able to customize it beyond what they want or need for their campaign? So you kind of do have to leave things open-ended. I know I've looked at other content, and it seems like it's very vague. And it's almost not worth buying because it's just a framework, right? And then you have some supplements that are just way too detailed. Too much stuff to remember, too many things considered. And then you have this middle ground that if you are an experienced game master or world builder, you'll know what stuff to include, what stuff not to include. So you don't have to necessarily use everything, and you can add your own. So just remember that you're never stuck in that framework. But I think giving people a little more as opposed to a little less is better. but that does increase page count. It does increase how much lore is already established, that sort of thing. So I think a happy medium somewhere in the middle is going to be helpful in the long run. So these are just different things that the Storytell AI had suggested and built based off the prompts and the conversations that we had. And then I asked, okay, I said, sounds good. Define how guilds can be used in Panovo by world builders wanting immersive lore and homebrew flexibility, and using as a means to an end. A good place to start: how are guilds used in gameplay by GMs, by homebrew, and world builders? Leadership in game world might seek support, or they might shun, or they might loathe the guilds. So player characters, GMs, and NPCs might despise the guilds for various reasons. So we kind of get into that more, like, why use guilds, why not? Because sometimes people don't like that kind of unionized feel, right? They want to be independent, they want to be kind of loners. They don't necessarily want to be under the thumb of a guild. They want privacy. Maybe they want to treasure all of themselves and they don't want to share it, because I know in some guilds they might require a percentage of your intake to be a member. They might have to split up the treasure more. They might have to disclose what was found. So those are things that may not be good for player characters or for government and within the game. So there are things that might really go against gameplay or the game style. So you don't have to use guild. You can be just a solo group of adventurers that are not sponsored by anyone except for the guy paying, or the maybe they're inspired by the end goal or the treasure as opposed to working with a guild. So we put that kind of stuff in there just in case, because I think that you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but to mention that and to give those seeds of thought to the people who are going to be playing and setting up the adventures and running them, it's a good thing to have those. So it kind of keeps it in mind that this isn't for everybody, right? The guilds might appeal to 1/3, maybe up to a half of the players and the GMs, and the other half just want to do their own thing. They don't want this stuff. So you have that too. So GM implementation. So you can have a quest board template, and I think that's a good idea. So clear rats from a tavern basement. How many times have you seen that? That's a really basic thing, but it can be very fun with clever role playing, with good looking props and handouts, and decent rewards. So it doesn't always have to be 10 gold, right? It could be a favor. You can get free room and board at a tavern, whatever. Delivering messages, collecting herbs from nearby forest can turn into a whole adventure. And then you have rank D. So investigate missing livestock, escort merchant caravans, map unexplored sections of the wild realms. So these are different ranks. Rank B, so close an extraplanar rift, defend a settlement from wild realm incursions, and retrieve mana shards from dangerous locations. So these are just different kind of ideas for quest boards and such for the guild. So all this stuff would be kind of interesting to incorporate into any campaign, as long as it's not too overwhelming or too underwhelming, so don't have enough information. So I think there is a balance, and what that balance is going to depend on feedback from your teammates, from play testing, and from practicality in regards to publishing. So how many pages do you want this thing to be? Because if it's anything over 50, that's going to be a larger supplement, like probably around 100 pages or so, maybe 125, depending on if you have art and images and stuff. But then you get past 300 pages, now you're looking at a full-on adventure. I'd probably save those for campaign quests and those sort of things. But it really does depend on what you're trying to do. But if your guild book outweighs your player's guide, I don't think that's a good thing. So there's that too. So if you already have like a monster manual, a player's handbook, and a GM's guide, and then you come out with this really cool supplement that overshadows everything else you built, people are going to buy that instead of the other stuff. So or want to seek that. So you have that issue to look at too. So you want to kind of keep everything in line with the overall look and the goals of your setting or your design. But at the same time, you could break this thing up into 3 different, or maybe just do 1 guild book per guild. But then you suffer from the other side of that where you have all these splat books for every single thing. And if you guys are around for 3.5 and such, there were so many like homebrew splat books for every single thing. Like, oh, here's the Chronomancer's Guild, and here's this guild, and it's a separate PDF that has like 20 pages. So you got to be careful with that too. I don't want to get that glut or that bloat. That's another thing to consider. So balance is really important when it comes to planning these things out. So I might cut some of this stuff out, depending on what the group thinks and playtest and that sort of thing. Because then it can just get overwhelming, or it could just be not worth the effort. So you have to think about that. But when it comes to your own homebrew, it won't matter as much. You can control that. It's your world. You can do what you want. But if you're going to sell as a product to the open, to the internet and to the role-playing game community, those are things you might have to consider. So then you have, let's see. So it's actually just refining and adding world building, compiling, considering what's already there. I like these tables that it can make. So Storytell.ai, you can actually copy this table and you can put it into a PDF, or you can format it in such a way so that you can import it into Fantasy Grounds, however you want to do it. But this is kind of a neat tool. So Storytell.ai, I think, is useful, especially in a team dynamic. I don't know if using it solo is the best way to go. I'm not sure. But if you have a team and you all pitch in for the tokens, I think that's helpful. Like maybe set up a fund, like every month everyone piles in like, X amount of maybe you guys use Zelly or PayPal or whatever. And then one person will divvy out the tokens, because that's kind of what we did with our team. Is they gave me a lot of tokens because I generate a ton of images and content. But now that I know that tokens go pretty quick, so they burn up pretty quick, depending on what you're doing and how many conversations you have, I think what I'll do is I'll take these PDFs that I've created, the canon ones, the ones that are done, and import those in and kind of mess with them about into my own personal thing, and then bring that back in as a conversation, so that I'm not like doing like just regular day-to-day prompting, because I think I'll run out of tokens in like less than a weekend with how much I use it. So I'm going to be a little bit more judicious and cautious about my token use. I did try an image, so let's look at that. So as I'm developing, I asked, what is the main Adventurers Guild in Kisdir? I knew the answer, but I wanted it to give me that information. So it said the main Adventurers Guild in Kisdir is the Bravehammer Adventurers Guild. In organized play context, the Kisdir Adventure Guild chapter is also known as Iron Peak Guild, which is characterized as clan integrated, dwarf majority, and traditionalist in its approach. It says the guild operates within Kisdir's unique political structure where clan loyalty supersedes guild membership. So that's kind of important. Guild membership must be approved by the thanes or the clan leaders, and the guild is integrated into the clan power structure. So for dwarves and such, that kind of makes sense. This means that guild membership follows clan identity first, and the guild serves clan interests before purely professional ones. So this was taken from the the comprehensive guild system for Panovo. And then I asked it to design a fantasy-themed logo for the Adventurers Guild of Kisdir. So this isn't too bad. Like, I'm okay with that, but it looks a little bit too much like a logo that you would use for streaming or something. Those gamified ones that you would see like on Twitch. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm not really fond of this style, but it looks good. Like I could live with it, but I don't know. I would have to ask my teammates if this is something they'd want to use for that particular adventure. Maybe this would be turned into a black and white element that can be used in the PDF for like kind of like background, kind of faded or kind of transparency kind of thing on the pages. Very vaguely like light gray in the very background or something. I might use it for symbology, but I don't think I would have this as a cover necessarily. So this is the things that, and it shows you the thinking. So this is what it used for the prompt. And I think it uses DALL-E 3 and then it uses Google Gemini, but I don't know if it's using the latest version. So I would probably copy this and then I'll take this into the tool that I like, which is Google Gemini 3.1. So I don't know if that tool is using the latest one or not, or if I can specify which AI generation tool for images. So I think for now, I'm going to just do my images in a separate app. I would like to do everything in Storytell AI, but I don't want to burn up all of my tokens. I want to save that for the world building. So I probably would just use Gemini. So I want to see what that looks like. So this is my own personal account. It does use Google Gemini in the Storytell AI, but I'm not sure how it I'm not used to it yet, so I got to figure out how much it uses. But so I'm going to say I'm going to use the same prompt, and then I'm going to go ahead and just see what it comes up with. So this is what it came up with, which is great. It's not bad. Like I would give this a B grade. I like it, but I just don't like it. Looks kind of, you can really tell it's AI, and it just, I don't know. It looks kind of old, like dated in regards to AI capability. We'll see. Yeah, see, that's way better. So I like this style better. The other one looks too, like I said, it looks too gamified. This looks like it should be on a cover, right? To me, I don't know if what you guys think, but how is the memory of it? I use ChatGPT, and after 100 prompts, yeah. So I'm not sure yet, Adam, but being that it draws upon several tools, I haven't come across a memory issue yet, but I haven't used it long enough either. So being that it uses several different tools, like for writing, it probably uses, you know, one of the other tools. So yeah, I agree that memory is a big thing, that context memory. But I know that Google Gemini has way more capability in that regard. It takes a lot longer for it to forget things. But with Storytell AI, if you do it and you can do pretty good sized chunks and then save it as a PDF, and then it will reference that. So in a way that kind of makes a staging point for your building. So if you get to a certain point after you do like 50 prompts or something, you can save that as a PDF and use that as a source. So that's helpful. And I think that it uses your chat sources more. And what's really neat is you can upload more content and you can connect to like your Google Drive. So that's another thing that Gemini does well, is you can connect it to your other services. And that way you have access to content for reference and that sort of things. But as far as forgetting goes, that I don't think that problem is going to go away regardless of the tool you use, because of the limitations of AI, period. The amount of compute, the amount of tokens, the amount of storage, the amount of basically of what the service provides is a real issue. And that's going to hit, that's basically, we're hitting that now. We're at peak. Even though that at CES, the new content that was shown at CES this year, the Consumer Electronics thing, with NVIDIA's new content coming out, I think that's going to be a game changer in the next couple of years. But until then, I honestly, my answer is I don't know yet. But Storytell AI seems pretty strong, like because it draws upon different tools. So in this case, it used Claude 4.5 Sonnet. So it didn't use ChatGPT. And supposedly what it does is it takes whatever AI tool it thinks is better and use that. I don't know if I have a choice as to what it will use, but it says that it uses for chat and such, it'll use Sonnet, but I don't know what it used for the image generation. I would have to look into it and see. I'm going to do a little bit more research, but there are lots of tutorials. I need to get myself caught up on that part of it because I'm still kind of new to Storytell, even though our partners or friends have been using this for a while. It's just getting better, and we're going to provide Storytell AI with feedback, And one of the feedbacks I would like to give them is the ability to upload different content that would feed in as templates, meaning images for PDF output. But yeah, that's a great question. How is the memory of it? Yeah, so yeah, the memory is pretty good so far. But if you're worried about memory, I would use Google because I don't run into that issue. I mean, it rarely starts sometimes on image creation it does have limitations, but on text it really doesn't. So I mean, this thing does really well when it comes to generating images. I mean, it's just hands down one of the best tools right now, for a bit. But as far as Storytell AI, like compiling ideas, working as a team, uploading content, it's pretty decent. But I would say Google Gemini in itself is a close second, and it really does allow you you can create gems, which is like the equivalent of the projects in ChatGPT. And it does a little bit better job in actually using what you've uploaded as opposed to just doing whatever it wants. I think that's something I don't like about ChatGPT is it will kind of just, even though you've given it explicit instructions and content that you've uploaded, it still wants to do what it wants to do, And the other thing that goes hand in hand with Gemini is for tools, you have a lot of these different tools, but then you have things that you can grab. So you can add from your Google Drive, you can add from your photos, and you can add from Notebook LM. And if you use Notebook LM, it kind of works like Storytell AI does. And basically, that would be another tool that you can use that's free or that kind of comes with Google Suite. So if you can't afford Storytell AI and you don't like the tokens and such, then you can just use Google LM Notebook to upload all of your actual materials that you have, like PDFs and such. There is like a 200 megabyte limit, so you can't upload every single thing, but you can upload quite a bit of sources, websites. It's really cool. It'll make summaries and all kinds of neat stuff. But basically, like I'm working on something for Daggerheart. I have a project for Fallout. I have something for Panovo here, which I would probably use as a source if I was going to generate images and content for it. So it just depends on what your needs are, but I think Storytell is all right so far. I'm not going to say it's like the best tool in the world, but I am going to say that it's useful. And to me, that's good enough. I mean, I don't need a perfect solution, but Gemini, I think for me personally, is what I would use for a personal level, for me, myself, and I. But as a group collaborative, I think that the Storytell AI is the way to go. In this case, there's other ones like this out there, but this is the only one I've had access to. And I'm going to start looking more into using these credits because just for this content here, I use 312 credits. That's quite a bit. So it gets into like the credit system and how you consume it. So I need to go over this and figure this out because I'm not really penny pinching on credits, but it's $10 for 10,000 credits, and I use like 300 something. So personally, I don't like the credit system. I don't want that, but I'm not paying for this, so I'm not going to complain. And my team actually gave me they gave me like 80,000 credits, so I can't bitch about that. I mean, that's a pretty good number. And a lot of them are only getting 30,000 or whatever, so I can't complain. So I have a lot of more freedom in how I can use the tool, but I'm going to be a lot more picky and a lot more judicious as to how I use this tool. And I'm going to just mainly use it for only Kizdeer, not for goofing around like for this. I'm not going to use it for this anymore. I think this can make me a prompt, but it doesn't have to generate the artwork. And honestly, I can take all this information that we've generated in here and put it in Gemini and the Google LM tool and kind of do the same thing. So Google LM Notebook is probably one of the best research and development tools that you can have for not necessarily free, but what I like about it is you can pay for it with like your Google points and stuff like that. So if you're on a budget, you don't have a lot of money, I think this would be a good tool for world building, especially if you're going to build on stuff that's already out there. Like these are all projects that are related to different aspects of role-playing games. Like I have a Curse of Strahd type of thing here specific to that. And I have some custom things, and I have stuff for Fallout, and then I have things for Fantasy Grounds, and then I have just all kinds of different projects like Cyberpunk Red. So if I come in here, I actually own a lot of the PDFs, and I've uploaded a lot of the ones that I can place in here, including the starter guide. And then I use that to query, and then you can make these reports over here, which you can create your own study guide. You can do a blog post. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff. So like, for instance, let's see, this is an image, I believe, that it made based off the content. And this is like an Edge Runner survival guide to Night City, you know. So you can make really cool handouts like this for your players and just for the game itself. So you can create really cool content with Notebook, Google LM integrated with Google Gemini. That's huge. I don't know if it's available on the phone app, but I can lay in bed essentially and do this stuff and work on it every night, you know, and not have to go to my computer every time. When I use Storytell.ai, I kind of want to use my computer, so I'll use it on my main computer, but I can use Gemini in bed essentially. Not a good idea to mix AI with sleep, but definitely you have that flexibility. So anyhow, I think that's enough for today. I think I've yammered enough, but Storytell.ai gives me tools to build in Fantasy Grounds. And I also, you know, you could use it for anything you want. You don't have to use it for that. And here's like the kind of like the stuff. I wish I had a little bit more control over this formatting because this is the PDF output. But this is good for like entering into Fantasy Grounds and such. Would probably be good enough for that. As far as Fantasy Grounds goes, it started a whole new campaign. And I'd only use this for developing, like if I'm going to build this, you know, this Adventures Guild supplement, I would build all of it first in PDF format, and then the rest of the team members would look at it. And then from there, we would go into, you know, the art or the images. Maybe I would start off with some of that. So that's kind of why I was generating that image. So I think I'm going to use the one that I generated in Google LM and upload that later, or for Gemini, because Gemini does a really good job. I really like the output that I'm getting. So it's kind of cool. But anyhow, folks, you guys take care. Have a good day. And I'm going to put some links at the end of the video. So if you want to look at any of these tools, you're welcome to. I'm no expert. I'm still kind of getting used to using it, but this is another tool that consolidates different tools all in one. So it's kind of like a suite of AI tools where you're getting Gemini, you're getting Claude, you're getting ChatGPT, you're getting everything. And I think that's probably why they have to use the token system, is that to keep track of how much actual usage you're getting out of it. So we'll see. But you guys take care. I'll see you around next time, and give Storytell.ai a shot if you have the budget and the time for it. And also check out Panovo, the game world that we have that's available on Fantasy Grounds. Also, if you use Steam, you can buy it through Steam for Fantasy Grounds, and it's on the Drive-Through RPG as well. And yeah, so you guys take care. And by the way, it's for 5th edition. We haven't developed it for